So far, we've been working with the structural elements of a SharePoint site. So we've been looking at site collections, webs, lists, and libraries, and how they provide the site structure, and the contents of the lists and libraries are its data. But the pages enable the site to display information and interact with the user. So a few versions of SharePoint ago, Microsoft introduced the concept of web parts. And web part is kind of like, think of a web part as a widget that you can drag and drop onto a page. And as long as that page is built to accept those widgets. So there has to be some type of a framework that allows you to drag and drop and add some personalization to those widgets or web parts. And so that's exactly what SharePoint gives us. It's actually built into ASP.NET, but SharePoint extends that by saving that metadata about the personalization of those web parts into the SharePoint content database. Now, previous versions of SharePoint, that was kind of like the main way of doing development. There was a big misperception that people thought that if you're doing development in SharePoint, all you're developing were web parts. And that's definitely not the case. There's lots of other different types of development to be doing inside SharePoint besides just web parts. And sometimes it still may be the case. You still may be doing web parts, but in other cases, you may be building just regular custom controls. You could be building different master pages if you're doing some type of branding for your site. You could be even doing external applications that are just calling into the SharePoint web services. So people coming from SharePoint know about these pages that house all these web parts, and they're called web part pages. But people come from ASP.NET sometimes may consider them to be content pages. And what they are is it's based on a layout defined by the master page. And so it's really a combination of the ASP.NET web part framework with SharePoint for the persistence of the position of the web parts and the properties of the web parts. That data gets stored in the SharePoint content database. And SharePoint 2013 has wiki pages that support web parts. And in fact, the team site homepage is a wiki page. So the site that we just were looking at, that is actually a wiki page. And those web part pages that are created by users actually live in a document library. And in fact, for our team site, that homepage is a wiki page, and it lives in a special type of document library called a wiki page library. So when users go to create new pages in a SharePoint team site, you can choose. You'll be presented with a dialog to create either a page or a web part page. And the page is a wiki page, and it's what SharePoint creates if you select new page from the site actions or from the new menu of the document library. So the more flexible wiki page is the default, and a team site has the site pages library that store the basic pages, and then it also contains a site assets library. So if you want to store resources like the images that you use in your pages. So when you go to create a web part page, there's 8 different layouts or templates to choose from, plus just a basic page. So the other types of web pages are the pages that come with list forms. So when you create a new list, there's some ASPX pages that get created by default for the new and the edit and the view page. And then also, when you turn on publishing in SharePoint Server 2013, that adds several different page layouts for publishing pages. Publishing gives you a lot more flexibility than just a regular team site. So publishing would be that's true web content management, where it's more like public-facing websites or maybe like an intranet scenario, whereas a team site's more of internal usage. There's a lot more functionality in the publishing pages for adding workflows to approve the content of a page, that type of thing. So the way these web part pages work is just like all pages in SharePoint and in ASP.NET pages that use master pages, they inherit their structure from a master page. And so the master page is going to define different parts, different placeholders where data can go. So typically, the master page is going to have a top navigation area, and then it's going to have left-hand nav. That would be where the quick launch is at. And then SharePoint has several other things that it adds to the different master pages, like the logo and that type of thing. And then there's one area in the middle, that one placeholder that's defined. That's where we put our content. And so then inside that main placeholder is where we actually put our content for our pages. And inside there, we can actually put yet another template. So those choices that you would see when you go to create a web part page that have different layouts, those layouts actually go inside that main placeholder. And inside the layout, you'll have web part zones. And so a web part zone is special because whenever there's a web part zone, it knows about web parts. And so you can place web parts into those zones. And you can leave it blank and not put any web parts in the zone, or you can put however many you want, stack them up and reorder them. So some of the commonly used web parts in SharePoint is a content editor web part. It's pretty useful for putting whatever type of content you want in there. You can copy and paste from a Word document if you wanted to. So it's really easy for end users to add content to a page by using a content editor web part. And then there's also an image web part. So it's kind of like a pretty useful way of inserting an image into a specific area of a page. And then page viewer web part, that's basically like an iframe that you can show a page from any other website inside your particular web part zone, wherever you've placed the web part. So it can give you like a really cheap and easy way to do some simple integration with another site. So then we have the list view web parts, and their job is to show data from the lists. And so you may not have even known it, but when you're working with lists, when we created the context lists, it's actually being rendered by a list view web part. And so when you open the web part gallery, you can actually choose from a selection of different list views for each of the lists on your site. So every time you create a list on your site, there's going to be an associated list view web part that's associated with that list. So it's already ready to go to drag and drop onto a page to display your list. And then within the list view, you can change what view you want depending on the views you have defined for your list. And it'll honor that, and it'll render your list using that view. And then the list form web parts, these are used to display and edit the list items. So when you go to create a new item or edit an existing item in a list. And then data view web parts are for connecting and displaying data from different sources, external databases and websites. And then the content query web part, this only comes with SharePoint Server. And the reason why it's only part of Server is because it requires the publishing feature to be turned on, and publishing only comes with the SharePoint Server, not SharePoint Foundation. And content query web part is a nice way to query the lists in your site collection, and you can have aggregate displays and stylized views of the results. And then there's also the content search web part, which allows you to do predefined searches and have the search results show up inside your web part. So let's go ahead now and take a look at creating a web part page and putting a web part on a web part page. So let's go into the site contents of our team site. And I'm going to go into site pages. And notice how this is our home page right here. And this is actually living in this site pages, which is a wiki page library. So if I click here, I'm just going to go back to the home page. So let me go back. And notice how we also have some of the other libraries here. Site assets, so that's for storing pictures and any types of images that we want to use. Style libraries for your style sheets. You put JavaScript files in there as well. So let's go back to our site pages, and we're going to create a new site page. So the way we do that is we click New Document. We have a choice. We can create either a wiki page, which is just a basic page, or a web part page. So I'm going to create a web part page, and I'll just call it Test Web Part Page. And here's the layout templates I have. So notice here, this first one is selected. I have a header, footer, 3 columns, or I can just do a full page vertical. Basically there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different types. These are all the canned layouts. So I'll just choose the, we'll go with the header, footer, and 3 columns. I think that's fine. So we'll go with that. And then notice how we also get choice of where we want to store it. So again, these web part pages can get stored in any document library, but we're going to store this in site pages. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create. And now we have our web part page. So you can see the layout here. And here's everywhere we see add web part, add a web part. Those are web part zones. So you don't have to add just one. You can add as many as you want. So let's go, and I'm going to add a web part. I'll add it to the middle column. So clicking Add a Web Part brings up this dialog here showing different categories of web parts. And so I can choose different types if I want search-driven content, search. We could look at business data, community, could do the content search web part. Here's the content editor. So this is where you can basically put whatever you want in there. Bunch of different new social collaboration web parts. So let's go ahead and I'll just put a content editor. And I'll add some content. So I'm done with that, and I can go ahead and say stop editing. And then I'm going to go back to site contents. Now I have another item that we just added. So here's my test web part page, and here's my page that we just created. So you can see it has the same look and feel. It's using the same master page for the menuing on the top. It's got the quick launch on the left. It's got the top nav. All of that's because of the master page. And then the area in the middle where we put our web part, the content editor, that's content that we authored ourselves.